The trade deadline has come and gone, and it certainly feels like we are entering a new chapter of NHL history.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, joined by my partner in crime, Nick Zararis, on this post-trade deadline episode. Nick, how are you feeling?
I'm so tired, dude. I'm so tired. Got to plug the show a lot, though, on the stream, which was good. So quite a bit of Flames talk. So if you're joining and you watch the trade deadline live reaction, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Today, we're going to be talking about the obvious. This definitely feels like the Flames and a lot of other teams have kind of turned a corner and are making progress or trending in a certain direction, different from where they were. And we're going to talk all about that. And of course, where the Flames really are right now and if this is sustainable. But make sure you subscribe to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. That way you never miss an episode. We're here for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, your team every day. What are your initial thoughts after Craig Conroy's first trade deadline?
Like a lot of this is something we've talked about a lot over the last week and a half. The idea of, what do you prioritize? Do you want as many cracks at it as you can? Or do you want one really good chance? And that's what a lot of this stuff comes down to. We talk about that in terms of roster construction. Would you rather be like the Bruins of the last decade who make the playoffs every year, and then once every couple years, they go on a nice run? They make a conference final, a Stanley Cup final. Or would you rather be one of these teams that makes the playoffs kind of inconsistently, but when they do make the playoffs, they push a lot of chips into the middle? It's the same thing with these trades. Do you want a lot of little things in hopes that all of those can fill in the gap and that, if you get 5 things, 2 of them might be useful? Or would you rather get 2 things and if you strike out on both, you lost the whole trade? That's what a lot of the last week has come down to.
Where do you think the Flames are at? Because it feels like they really are just collecting defensemen from any corner of the world in any organization, and I don't know what to make of that.
So that tells me a few things. Number one, it tells you they're looking for something they don't have, and I know that sounds obvious. They're trying to fill in holes, but I'm talking about in terms of skill sets. They feel that they have a certain archetype, like Weegar and Anderson. I wouldn't say they skew offense, but their offense is more valuable than their defense. So it feels like in all of these guys that Conroy's plucked, other than Bruce DeWitch, who does lean offense as well, they all seem to be guys, and Miramonov does kind of skew offense as well, but it does feel like they don't think they have guys in the pipeline that are relatively ready. That's the one caveat I will give, is that, Bruce DeWitch, Miramonov probably might get a look to play for the Flames down the stretch in the last month. I don't know about Bruce DeWitch, probably not, but they want a different type of skill set than the guys they already have. And they want to get younger. That's the other thing too. They just need to get younger, which in turn makes them cheaper.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about that and how they don't have really an option but to get younger and cheaper because, they're kind of already old and they are an expensive team. So I think that's obviously forced their hand a bit, but for the long-term plan in the much bigger picture, you're going to want those younger guys who can step up now or relatively soon and become true impact players.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, nobody really did great in their returns for any of these trades. Florida got Tarasenko for some mid-round picks. The Vegas got Mantha for some mid-round picks. Hanifin for a one that's next year's one now because they traded their one this year. They got Hurdle for spare change, a first-round pick and some other miscellaneous. They got the mystery box. It could be anything. It could even be Tomas Hurdle. Nobody did great. Jake Gensel didn't get a great return, and Jake Gensel was the best player available at this deadline. You look around, man. Toffoli only got a 2 and a 4, and he's got 26 goals. I don't know, man. I really don't know. You would think some of these GMs would be like, if everybody's doing this, maybe I should try something different. And instead, everybody kind of chose volume over quantity. Over quality.
It felt very strange. I feel like we saw a lot more picks floating around in returns rather than, prospects or a roster player. Do you think that has a lot to do with the cap space and just the cap constraint?
That's probably part of it. We talked about this the other day, that there's just not a lot of money in the system, so it's generally hard to move players. There are shenanigans, and you can get creative. You can get teams to retain salary. You can buy cap space from a third team with draft picks. I mean, hypothetically speaking, you could do, I think the Leafs did this a few years ago, where you can technically do that twice, where you can get two teams to retain 25% and you give each of them something, and then you get the player at 50%. There's a means of being creative. Look at what Vegas did in getting Hurdle. Some of that is different. And the LTIR stuff at this point, I can't make the conversation. I don't care anymore.
No.
Chicago did this in 2015. They did this almost a decade ago. And it was kind of fugazi then. Tampa did it. It was fugazi then. Vegas did it last year, and they're going to do it again this year. And every other team wants the opportunity to be able to do this, which is why it will remain the way it is. We talk about this with fighting, with the hits to the head. If the owners really didn't like it, it would be out of here like that. Just like that.
Yeah, and this is, again, something that teams can use to their advantage. And it's not necessarily put in place for, cap circumvention. It's there to do its job. And I don't know, I don't like the comments about people calling, Markstrom, the softest player and stuff. Things happen.
Markstrom's got a bad injury history. That's one thing. We talk about it from the context of when you get hurt and then you rehab. During that rehab process, because you're hurt and you're compensating, your body's going to move differently, which is going to make other parts of your body more frail. When you are consistently injured, it is hard to stay healthy. It's very stupid and very cliche, but healthy players stay healthy, hurt players stay hurt, because hurt players have to compensate for their injuries, and it really messes with the kinesiology. I think that's the word of their body, how they move, their movement style. So I understand the skepticism. And Vegas already, rubs a lot of people the wrong way just with the way they came into the league and were instantly good. I know a lot of people have the Catholic mindset of you have to suffer before you reward. And a lot of people don't like the fact that Vegas came in and was instantly good and has won a cup, in their first 6 years of existence.
Yeah. And I mean, he has a lacerated spleen now. I don't know how that happens, but that's a new injury I've never really heard of before. But obviously, best of luck to everybody that is gearing up for the playoffs and hoping to be back by then. But coming up next, we are going to hone in on the Flames and where they're at after they just demolished the Tampa Bay Lightning. But first, I want to talk to you about something that makes everyone's lives easier, and that would be Factor. Eating better is easy with Factor's delicious ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef crafted, dietitian approved, and ready to go in just 2 minutes. You will have over 35 different options to choose from every week, including Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Also, there are more than 60 add-ons to help you stay fueled up and feeling good all day long. What are you waiting for? Get started and get after your goals. 2-minute meals are fuel up and fast with Factor's restaurant quality meals that are ready to heat and eat whenever you are. So that's fantastic for people like Nick and I who are constantly on the go, and especially this week, just kind of squeezing in meals when we can because, well, the news cycle never ends. Sign up and save today with Factor. We've done the math, and Factor is less expensive than takeout, and every meal is dietitian approved to be nutritious and delicious. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 and use code LockedOnNHL50 to get 50% off. That is code LockedOnNHL50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 to get 50% off. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a podcast. We're here for you 5 days a week. What do you make of last night's game against the Lightning? If anything.
Lightning Flames, it's one game. Tampa Bay added a couple guys today over the last week. They got Duclair. They're going to try and make the playoffs and then get by on, the 4 or 5 guys that are still good that are left from the teams that won the cup. It's one game. You don't want to read too much into one game, but again, in spite of a lot of the nonsense and the stuff in the air around the team, they're showing you something, man. Like we talked about in regards to pretty much anybody, like last week it was, all right, well, it's time to kiss Sidney Crosby's Penguins goodbye. Let's stick the nail in their coffin, never to be heard from again. And the Penguins have since kind of, I don't want to say rapidly deteriorated because that kind of feels like underselling it. It feels like in a matter of a week, the Penguins went from maybe they could turn this around to, oh my God, Sidney Crosby's going to retire on a lottery team in the matter of like 6 days. And, beating Tampa's got to feel good. That's the biggest thing. I in a season like this, where there's not a lot to play for other than each other, that really can be a motivating factor. The guys that are still here, I forget. I forget if it was Fielding Yost or Bo Schembechler. It was one of the Michigan coaches way back in the day that he came in, he took over as the coach, and he basically said, I'm going to run the most miserable training camp of all time. By the end of summer, most of you aren't going to be here by the time we play the first game of the season. But I promise you, the guys who stay, they're going to be champions someday. And eventually they did start winning national titles. But it's the same kind of principle here. If you're still here and you didn't piss and moan, you didn't drag your feet, you didn't want to go somewhere else, eventually you will be rewarded for that. Speaking of the idea of the Catholic penance for eventual reward from the first segment, eventually all this suffering is going to be worth something if you are still here.
Yeah, and I think it really just speaks to how close of a team they are to each other. Like, it doesn't feel like, oh, there's like a diva in the room or something where it's like, oh, we have to be winning. Like, I'm miserable. Trade me if we're not winning. Like, I feel like, I think it was Huska. It was either Huska or Conroy who really talked about their resilience. Yeah. And we said it a lot last season, but like, they're kind of like cockroaches. They weren't dying. You couldn't do anything. And it really feels like that again, because I mean, yeah, they didn't make up any ground last night, but they played like their lives were on the line, and it was entertaining.
When you got nothing to play for other than the guy next to you, when you mess up, the other guy's going to give you a dirty look. You don't want to disappoint the guy next to you. It really is that simple sometimes. And generally speaking, when you have a good team that plays like that, where the star players are like that, you're usually a really good team. When everybody kind of has that mentality of, I can't mess up because it's going to mess up the game for the other guy, the guy next to me, that's where you get into a really good team. I mean, there's a reason the first thing they do when you join the military is strip you all of your individuality, so you are willing to die for the guy next to you. Obviously, that's an extreme case. We're talking about a sport, not going and serving in combat. But there's a reason that mentality is so pervasive in any team environment, where it's not about you, it's about the team. If you mess up, that messes it up for the team. And it's really simple. These guys are showing you something. Spite, a little bit of, okay, you don't believe in us, we'll do it ourselves. And you got a great goalie having a great season, all to kind of buoy it and keep it moving along. You got to feel, for the guys that are still here, you got to feel really happy. That's the big thing. It would have been so easy for everything to have gone horrendously wrong this year. First time head coach, trading off the good players, to still have this. And of course, they're professionals. They get paid a lot of money. They should care. I don't disagree with you. But we have seen a lot of teams with expensive players just phone it in for full seasons. Look at what's going on in Columbus right now.
Yeah.
Where their season went off the rails a week before it started, where Babcock gets fired. They bring in Vincent, the assistant coach, to coach the team. And nobody has an interest in playing hockey. Like, you watch the Blue Jackets, it's just god-awful hockey up and down. On occasion, they dial it up and play well against a good team just to kind of thumb their nose at them. But with a better coach and a better mentality, the Blue Jackets very well could be in the mix for a playoff spot right now if they actually had some semblance of that team concept we've been talking about. But good on the Flames. Very good on the Flames.
And I think that speaks to the culture that they have cultivated in the locker room and within the organization, because like you just said, it is so easy to just be like, okay, I'm washing my hands of this. I don't care. This season is a wash. We are the fourth worst team in the league. Why would I care? And why should I put effort forward? And we're seeing the opposite of that. And it's refreshing. And I appreciate the morale that is bleeding through that locker room.
It's a very motivating feeling. And one thing I will say, I think part of it is being the inverse of last year, where last year's team couldn't find a way to win any of these close games to save their lives. I think they set the record for most one-goal losses and close to the record for overtime losses. The big thing I think that really makes a difference this year, at least in my opinion, Markstrom's having a really good season, and there's gotta be in the room a collective sense of, we can't screw this up for him. His season went so poorly last year. To come back and respond, to play this way, if we mess it up for him, we're terrible people. That I really do feel like that's a component within this season.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. It's just, Markstrom has kept them in how many games this season? And in the last month and a half alone, how many times has the team come out and in their post-game press conferences saying, we were only in that because of Markstrom, or it'll be an intermission report, Markstrom, if we didn't have Markstrom in there, it would be like a 3-0 game. And I mean, great. I'm glad that you're playing for him, but can you just show us a little something else too, and not just rely on him?
See, the counterpoint to that, and as a Ranger fan, I'm well versed in this. The goalie's part of the team too. That is your counterpoint. Anytime someone says you're getting carried by your goalie, the goalie's on the team too.
Yeah, you're not wrong. They're on that roster. They're employed. I'm fascinated with how this season has gone, with the amount of adversity that they faced last year into the offseason, and the talk that had been surrounding the team with all the UFAs needing to be signed or traded, and they're not playing as poorly as you might expect.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. No, I expected this season to get pretty off the rails once they started
Yeah.
trading people. You can only do so much if you're not that talented of a team. But in spite of all logic, the Flames are being quite pesky down the stretch.
Yeah, and it's nice to see and good for them. I think that this is just, another just bonus points for them because they're doing a lot more.
That's the biggest thing. It is purely at this point for these guys that are still here to keep playing this hard and to keep winning, because God bless them. If they make the playoffs, God bless them. If they make the playoffs with the season they've had and the talent they have, that's a real accomplishment and something you can point to guys you draft and say, you want to be a part of this. You should stay. And to free agents and say, we don't even need you. We made the playoffs without you. Imagine how good we could be if you came here.
Yeah, it's certainly something to think about, and I'm sure it will come down to game 82 with this team, just like it typically always does. But coming up next, we are going to talk about this new phenomenon of the really good teams absolutely stinking and the less good teams kind of stepping up. But before we do that, I do want to take a second and talk to you about Indeed. No matter how the last game went, anytime you need to take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed. If you're hiring, you need Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't have to pay. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process. Find great talent through time-saving tools like Indeed, Instant Match assessments, and virtual interviews. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer valid through March 31st. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon to claim your $75 credit before March 31st. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. You need to hire, you need Indeed. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us today on this Friday edition of Locked On Flames. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at JessBelmosto and at Nick Zeraris. Last night, the Bruins did their final eras night, and it was the 2011 Stanley Cup team. Wow, it's been a while since, they've won anything, but it goes to show you how dominant you can be if you assemble a great team and build outward like the Flames could be doing.
That's ultimately your goal. I am a strong proponent of trying to get that core right and going from there. In an ideal world, I would like to say you identify your 4 or 5 key guys, and then once you have those guys in place, you just keep tinkering around them. That's your ideal way of building a roster, because that goes into the idea of make the playoffs consistently. Once in a blue moon, once every couple seasons, you get things to start breaking your way. The more chances you get, the better chance you got of winning. Yeah, I've made this point more than once, but the Lightning drafted Stamkos in 2009. They didn't win a cup till 20. The Avs took Landeskog in 2012 or 11. They didn't win the cup till 22. The Blues, the first guy they took was Pietrangelo. That was 08. That's 11 years later. Washington, Ovechkin, 13 years after the fact. Penguins are different. Blackhawks are different. But for the most part, this is a long process to get back to the top of the mountain.
Yeah, and we talk about that a lot on the show. This isn't something that happens overnight, but it's nice to kind of see the shift in that like Florida becoming super competitive. And, last year they made the Stanley Cup final. And this year they're going for it again. And that's encouraging.
Oh, absolutely. This is where I differ. Because the other day, there was the conjecture, there was speculation that maybe they're going to add the Atlanta team or a Salt Lake City team or whatever. And again, all that's going to do is further dilute the talent pool. You're going to add 2 more teams of meh. That's not to say adding more teams doesn't have a financial benefit. All the owners are not going to complain about getting $50 or $60 million each from each expansion team. That's what they get. I think it was 500 million was the buy-in for Vegas, if I remember correctly. And each team got something in the neighborhood. I forget exactly how much it was, but each team got something in the neighborhood of $50-60 million for the expansion franchise. And that doesn't go into the team. That's the owner just getting straight money. I understand from that perspective of adding an Atlanta, adding a Salt Lake City, just for the money. The problem with that is all you're doing is making more mediocre teams to compress the field even further. There are 6 really good teams in the West. The 6 teams that are currently in divisional playoff spots are all really good. LA is fine. Nashville is a nice story. They're fine. They're not good. Once you get past Nashville, nobody in the West is actually good. And then in the East, it's even worse.
Yeah.
Once you get past, the Leafs, the fall off from the Leafs to the next team is enormous.
Yeah. I mean, I talk about the Sabres a lot in terms of how long things have taken and how that's kind of the worst case scenario. But there are times where I truly forget that the Sabres and Senators are even part of the same conversation as a team like Detroit that has built themselves back up and are finally making themselves known that they actually are talented and they are competitive.
You think about how long that took. I mean, the last time Detroit made the playoffs, Obama was still president.
Wow.
Yeah, the last time they made the playoffs was 15-16. They haven't been out of the first round since 2013, the fake season that was only 40 games. So it took a long while for them to figure out, hey, maybe we shouldn't wait for all of our good players to age out before acknowledging, hey, we're rebuilding, which they did. Zetterberg had the medical retirement. Datsuk went back to Russia. Kronwall aged out, and they didn't have a team anymore after that, basically. And the last point I'll make on this before I throw it back to you, a lot of teams don't realize their window has closed until it's already too late. There are a lot of teams who don't realize, oh, we probably should have done this last year or the year before or earlier than that. But if you're this close, you're not going to take a step back to try and get back there. You're going to stay where you are and keep pushing and keep pushing. And it's really hard to stay competitive for a long period of time. I know a lot of people, Vegas annoys them, Tampa Bay annoys them, but Colorado annoys them too. Yeah, they are consistently good teams.
Absolutely. And I think that you should want to be one of those teams that people are tired of seeing in the playoffs. I think about the Patriots. Every year, the Patriots are going to make the playoffs. Okay, yes. This in the NHL, okay, the Golden Knights are going to make the playoffs. The Lightning, the Bruins, it's there, but I feel like we are finally seeing a little bit more of a switch happening.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about it real quick in your head, I'm not ready to say the Bruins are totally dead, but they're on their way out. They're on their way out. They maybe got 1 or 2 more cracks at this. Once Marchand really starts to fall off, then they're going to have to reassess where they're at. Not the Panthers, the Capitals and the Penguins, they're both on their way out.
Nursing homes.
After being the defining teams of the last 15 years, Crosby and Ovechkin really kind of carrying the league out of the lockout in 2004. Mm-hmm. Those 2 teams are kind of on their way out. And Carolina, Florida took them a long while. They made the playoffs a handful of times after winning the cup, but they weren't good. And then Rod came in and things really changed there. The Devils, they went, I want to say 8 years without making the playoffs, made it once, the Taylor Hall MVP year. They made the playoffs last year. They may or may not be ready to come into the conversation. Ottawa hasn't been in the conversation in quite a while. Buffalo hasn't been in the conversation in a while. Montreal has the one cup final appearance. That's really all they have to show for the last 10, 15 years, other than Carey Price's awards. We are really kind of in a transitionary period now where it really does feel that most of the good talent in the league is concentrated on a handful of teams, the vast majority of them in the Western Conference. And we are kind of seeing a different wave of teams taking, I don't want to say control because anybody could still win, but they're the better regular season teams.
Yeah. And it really does feel like things are kind of wide open in terms of who can actually win this thing. And that's exciting. It's fun. But I think that'll do it for today's episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. We will be back on Monday with the latest Flames news. And Nick, do you have anything you would like to add before we leave?
I was falling asleep last night, and I wasn't totally asleep yet. I wasn't dreaming. I was definitely hallucinating. And all I saw was a cap friendly sheet, and I kept trying to click on a player, and it wouldn't go to the next page. And then I blinked like 4 or 5 times and came back to consciousness. So I'm very glad the deadline passed.
Yes, everyone enjoy your weekend. Get some sleep. Make sure you drink some water, and we will see you on Monday.